In today's video, we're doing a very in-depth, detailed exploration and comparison of the inline 4, the V4, and the Boxer 4 engine. So the three main configurations of four-cylinder engines. Now, before we can do a comparison, we have to do what we always do in engine balance videos, and that is to explain the concepts of primary and secondary engine balance. Now, if you're familiar with the series and have heard all of this already and you don't want to hear it again, you can click here to skip. Otherwise, just keep watching. Okay, first up, primary balance. As you know, the piston is moving up and down. Well, you could say that in the Boxer it's moving side to side. In the V4 it's moving at some sort of angle, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that the piston is changing direction all the time. And if you get any object moving side to side, in the V4 it's moving at some sort of angle, but that doesn't matter. What primary balance. As you know, the piston is moving up and down. Well, you could say that in the Boxer it's moving side to side. In the V4 it's moving at some sort of angle, but okay, first up, primary balance. As you know, the piston is moving up and down. Well, you could say that in the Boxer it's moving side to side. In the V4 it's moving at some sort of angle, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that the piston is changing direction all the time. And if you get any object which has some sort of mass and you try to get it to change direction, you will see that the object resists this change in direction and it wants to keep moving in the same direction. This is called inertia. Now you can experience and feel inertia yourself. Just get any object which has a relatively significant mass for its relatively compact size. An external battery pack like this one will do just fine, and then put it in your hand and then move it in one direction and then try to suddenly change the object's direction of motion. You will see that you have to exert extra force with your hand to change the object's direction compared to the amount of force you need to keep the object moving in the same direction. In other words, you have to apply more force to change direction because you have to overcome the object's inertia. But here's the deal. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So when you're applying force onto the object to change its direction, the object is also applying force onto your hand. And in this scenario, your hand is the connecting rod and the object is the piston. And just like the object applies force onto your hand when it changes direction, so too does the piston apply force onto the entire engine when it changes direction. The direction of the force is in the direction of the piston's travel before it changed direction. So the forces point up at top dead center and down at bottom dead center. In other words, as the engine is running, a primary imbalance will shake/vibrate the engine up and down at the same speed as the RPM of the engine. Now, to have a smooth engine with good primary balance, we have to balance out the forces associated with a piston's inertia. Now, the inline 4 achieves perfect primary balance by using inertial forces of one piston to balance out the inertial forces of another piston. So what we have is two pistons going up and two pistons going down. This means that we have two primary forces pointing up and two
Warning, this video and all other advice of any kind, investing carries a high level of risk and the majority... Hello and welcome to Camel Finance. I'm your boy Camel, and we got a few things to say today. I don't think we need an introduction. It's Friday. We're going to put our feet up, chill a little bit. First of all, we're almost at 15k, so please do hit that subscribe button if you are not already. Second of all, I see a bunch of FUD going around. I see Germany's government has seized some Bitcoin, and oh no, they're going to dump, right? But as Christian points out here, okay, take a look at this. It's literally the exact same playbook, just a year later. Back here, March of 2023, we saw that there was more of this FUD where the US government had seized roughly 50,000 Bitcoins from the Silk Road and that it was going to unload them and dump them all on the market. These headlines happened to mark the exact cycle low right before we went from 19k to 31k Bitcoin. And today, we've just got the exact same thing. And people always forget, okay, it's easy to read a headline and say, oh, that's a lot of Bitcoin, right? It's a lot compared to what we hold, for sure. But in the scheme of things, okay, people are panicking here because the German government is selling $3 billion worth of Bitcoin. But it's a $1.3 trillion asset class by market cap with 22 billion in volume. So this is nothing, okay? And it's kind of the same with the Mt. Gox FUD. We see Tether FUD come up every now and then. And I've made videos going into all of that stuff. I don't need to repeat that. You can just either search for Mt. Gox on my channel or Tether on my channel, and you can see there's it's all just the same stuff over and over again. And once you've seen it, once you've been here long enough, then you see it and you just roll your eyes and move on. But obviously if you're brand new to the space, then it can be a little jarring, and that's all this really is, in my humble opinion. Like I said, $3 billion is a lot of money, right? But not relative to a $1.3 trillion market cap and 22 billion in volume. Having seen Michael Saylor just buy about a third of that, okay, a little under a third, I mean, I don't think it's worth worrying about. And it would be pretty interesting to me, at least, if this is just cycle lows doing cycle low things. As we know, as we pointed out, right, this was right into a cycle low. Where are we today? For Bitcoin, right into that cycle low, right? So if we find it in the next few sessions and come swinging out of here, then we'll be able to look back at this and say, that's just Bitcoin doing Bitcoin things, and come swinging out of here, then we'll be able to, as we know, as we pointed out, right, this was right into a cycle low. Where are we today? For Bitcoin, right into that cycle low, right? So if we find it in the next few sessions and come swinging out of here, then we'll be able to look back at this and say, that's just Bitcoin doing Bitcoin things, sessions and come swinging out of here, then we'll be able to look back at this and say, that's just Bitcoin doing Bitcoin things, cycle lows doing cycle low things, and the same pieces of FUD are recycled over and over again, ultimately because they do work. They do work. So keeping a close eye on that. I left myself this here just because a bunch of members keep asking me, Camel, you keep forgetting about XRP, you keep forgetting about XRP. If I don't want to cover your chart, I'll just tell you I don't want to cover it. But if I say I will and I don't, it's literally just because I've forgotten. So I've left myself here for no other reason than to say sorry to the members that I keep forgetting to cover this chart. I've been meaning to go over it, but at the same time, as you can see, absolutely nothing has happened. So this is what XRP does. It's essentially it's essentially a stable coin. At some point, I'm hoping it pumps, and that is the reason for the long. But will we get it or won't we? I don't know. It kind of broke out of this wedge, but as you can see, it just kind of went sideways out of there. So I don't know. We'll see. But I first of all, apologize for telling you I was going to cover it every day for about 2 weeks and then just forgetting every single session. And also, as you can see, we are trading right around the entry price. And how many months ago was this? This is quite a long time. Yeah, over 2 months ago. So that's why I've been sleeping on it, because frankly it's really boring. But as you can see, what am I supposed to say about that, right? It's just gone sideways. Hopefully it pumps. If not, stops there for a reason. Risk is managed as always. Getting into what I would consider to be more important charts, okay? The current Bitcoin range versus ETH in 2020. Let's make this a bit bigger. So here's ETH, okay? One of these, range, little box, line underneath, one of these, back test, go. What have we got today? One of these, box, little range, line underneath, one of these, back test. Are we ready? Are we ready to go? And if you ask me, sentiment right now is pretty bad. I think most people are probably not expecting this. I see a lot of people calling tops, a lot of people saying this is what comes next. And maybe they're right. The cycles do project a little bit more downside. But inarguably, if we were to do this, we would just be able to look at this and say, well, we've seen that before, right? So that is what it is. Cred here is suggesting kind of a similar thing. He thinks there's only so much more time we can compress here for Bitcoin. If this is indeed our bottom, we should be seeing a breakout occur within the next 24 to 48 hours maximum. If we were to break down from here, we'd find ourselves in that dream long zone, his words, not mine, and the most probabilistic place for a full-on reversal to form if we manage to get it there. So are we going to see compression like this and off we go? Again, I don't think many people would be expecting that. Maybe I'm biased. And if we were to compress here and break down, then this is Cred's dream long zone, somewhere between, I think it's about 60k and 63.5k, somewhere in that neighborhood where Cred is expecting this. I have to say that either one of these is permitted by cycles, but on a balance of probability, since the cycle low is down, I kind of would be expecting this a little bit more just based on where that cycle is. So anyway, we're not too far away. That's the good news. Of course, the question becomes, once we find that cycle low, do we do Bitcoin things? Or do we roll over and have to take the left translation off the table? We're going to find out soon enough. I think we are going to come out of here swinging. I really do. But, it doesn't matter what I think. What matters is what the price does. Really interesting chart here from T. Either it's August 2021 again, or this cycle is something different. So here's the breadth Momo for crypto. You can see one of these. What happened shortly thereafter was a snapback in the other direction. And that corresponded with what? That corresponded with this for total minus the stable coins. And as I'm sure you can already tell, at the hard right edge, we've got this. So the question becomes, do we see a snapback out of this cycle low, something like this? And does that correspond with something like this? I'll let you be the judge of that one. Meanwhile, we had some jobs data yesterday, and the job openings just keep falling off a cliff. So things just seem to be getting worse. It seems more and more likely that we are going to see a recession. You can see plunge, recession, rollover, recession, plunge, recession. And at the hard right edge, okay, telling us to keep an open mind, I think, about seeing a recession. I'm mostly going to save this stuff for the weekend's deep dive tomorrow. But again, initial jobless claims, okay, and here's the key one. The Philly Fed Business Index came in at just 1.3 versus the 5 estimate and the 4.5 from the previous. So the economy is slowing down. Like things are not really getting better despite the stock market keep going vertical. I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier on, but Michael Saylor has bought just under a third of the German government's Bitcoin. So pretty wild. They're now holding 226,331 Bitcoin that has cost them about $8 billion at an average price of 36k. So that's a big stack, right? That is a big stack. And I also found this. I thought I'd bring this up before we go into some charts, okay? Because have a look at Nvidia at the bottom relative to this tulip mania, this tulip bubble. You can see it's got all the same characteristics. This slow, steady lead-in phase, right? The first sell-off, bear trap. And then from there, we just go straight into a parabolic blow off top that ultimately results in a bubble pop. So is this coming in the not too distant future? I think it probably is. And I think this is one of the biggest risks, okay? Now, I'm by no means saying it's time to short Nvidia. I keep saying the same thing over and over again. Don't try to jump in front of any trains, because this thing could certainly go way, way, way higher than anyone can comprehend. But at some point, it may well roll over. At some point, it makes sense that it does roll over. And given that this is essentially carrying the indexes on its back, then doesn't it only make sense that if we do see some kind of rollover, whether it's soon or whether it's from way higher up, eventually when we do, okay, it's probably going to be pretty tough going for the stocks. I also think the question we need to be asking ourselves is, what does Bitcoin do if and when we see a tech sell-off like this? What if we do get some kind of final squeeze followed by this? What does Bitcoin do in that situation? I do think that's a question we need to ask ourselves. My intuition and experience tells me Bitcoin will probably do something similar. So that's why I'm very much leaning on the idea that we need to come out of here swinging and set a third angle. Because like I've been saying over and over again, from a 4-year cycle perspective, and what Bob was saying was he thinks this is most likely, and that sets up a nice right translated cycle. And from a cycle perspective, that's true. But what if we do this, okay, and then Nvidia bubble pops, the Nasdaq, the S&P, everything else comes crashing down. We go risk off, big strong dollar. Does Bitcoin do this in the face of that? I'm not convinced. So I really think we all should be championing for this. Whether you like Bitcoin or not, whether you care about left translation or not, whether you're just all in on altcoins, really Bitcoin is the tide that lifts all crypto boats. So I really think we should be championing this. I've got some reasons for thinking that this is probably the most likely. I'm not convinced Bob is going to get this personally, but as always, right, both of us are just coming up with our base case ideas. We're just looking at the charts and using our experience to try to figure out what's going on. And really, Neither one of us has a clue. That's the absolute truth. So either way, we're going to find out soon enough. For me, I really need to see this, or I think something is wrong. I can't get away from that fact. And I've been so bullish, right? Keep in mind, down here, I was screaming all-time high before the halving. And I've been screaming that since the lows, okay? My long-time followers know that. But I just don't... it's difficult for me to say this is what comes next, right? By the time we're in here, like I said, I think we're going to be in for some tough times. Now, I suppose one caveat to this is if Bitcoin does this and the stock market stops going vertical, right? If it's the stock market, whilst Bitcoin is putting in that second 60-day consolidation cycle, if this kind of trades down here somewhere or is doing this, then I think there's maybe space to see Bitcoin go up to a right translated cycle, and then maybe we can entertain that this whole July-August time frame is completely wrong. But in this neighborhood, okay, we're expecting to see a half cycle low. I think we're on day, what's this? Today will be day 14, so into day 20-ish will be a half cycle low shakeout. It makes me wonder if we see maybe this half cycle low go, and then, you know, we've got a third angle, maybe even a fourth angle coming in at some point. And again, I say to you, if this is what plays out, okay, daily cycle low in this time window, which is early August, maybe one final squeeze, breakdown, left translated cycle for the weekly. I mean, you know, if we do something like this, how is it that Bitcoin does well? I really wish, you got to understand, I wish it would be the ultimate risk off asset. I wish I could rotate all of my stock money and stuff into Bitcoin and then watch it go on to multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars, top in month 35 or 36, 12-month bear market. That's so easy to deal with.
I find it really strange that people aren't able to make the distinction between regimes and populations.
Well, the whole thing is insane.
Why, if you're angry with the Putin regime, okay, but why would that automatically make you say that you hate Russians?
But also compared
There's 140 million of them. You can dislike Macron and like French people. Why can't people make the distinction? Why do you have to be at war with an entire population just because you don't like the regime?
It's insane, but moreover, I can like or dislike anyone I want because I'm an adult man and I'm not a slave, so I can have any opinion I want.
We discriminate by nature. It's in our nature to discriminate.
But also, it's my birthright. Like, you can't tell me who I have to like and dislike.
No.
And I'm not going to submit to that. Last night we were talking at dinner and you expressed some views and I thought to myself, I'm eating with a conspiracy theorist.
Well, I think if you're not a conspiracy theorist by now, you're not paying attention.
You are often described that way. Does it rattle you?
Well, there was probably a time when it would have done, but I've gone through this process in the last 4 years of realizing that I spent the first 50-some years of my life believing and trusting a certain worldview.
Yes.
That with COVID and everything thereafter, all of that fell apart. It's like picking a thread on a tapestry. The whole thing just fell away into, and once you lose all of the things that you had taken for granted and trusted, then I suppose almost by definition you're in territory that others who aren't on the same path as you would call conspiracy theorists. But it's really just, you think, well, if I think now that they were lying to me about that and that and that, were they telling me the truth about anything at all?
Yes.
And you're aware that some of it must be true, but it's early yet. I've only been in this revelatory process. You know, the scales have only fallen from my eyes. My naive trust that I placed in the establishment and in the institutions that I had placed in them without really thinking about it terribly much.
Well, you were part of the establishment. You worked for BBC.
Well, I worked for BBC in as much as I was doing contract work for BBC.
Yeah.
So, but I was never directly employed by the British Broadcasting Corporation. I was, I'd be brought in to do a project, and a production company would pitch a project. I would be the presenter that was associated with that project, and I would be paid by the day for the duration of the project, and then I wouldn't be working for the BBC.
I'm just saying that people watched you on BBC.
Yeah, I'm sure they did. I wrote a column for the Sunday Times in Scotland. I had been for a while the president of the National Trust for Scotland. I was at one stage I was a fellow of the Royal Society of Edinburgh. So I was certainly associated with and part of the infrastructure of the establishment. That's absolutely the case. But I did all of it. I hold my hands up and say I did it in a naive way, without really interrogating the integrity of those institutions. It was just.
Oh, I'm not judging you. I've been there.
I just trusted that. I've always been a political atheist.
Yes.
Struggling to vote in general elections, but usually trying to vote for someone to make plain that I was taking part in the democratic process. But I've never been affiliated to any political party, any ideology. But I think I thought that the powers that be had mine and my family's interests at heart, whether they were red or blue,
of course,
or whatever. I thought basically they're going to keep the lights on. They're going to make sure that there's food in the supermarkets. They'll maintain the roads. There'll be schools open. There'll be a hospital if my family needs it, regardless. But now I just don't feel. I now know that the establishment doesn't have mine or my family's interests at heart. And that's hard. It's like a grieving process, I think.
Yes.
The analogy I would make with that, the 5 stages of grief that we're supposed to go through: the shock, the denial, the bargaining, the
anger,
the various stages that you're supposed to go through. I'm probably 4 years in, just coming to that point where I'm making peace with the fact that it's my responsibility that I didn't see the reality.
Yes.
That's me. So for a while I was angry with them, and I still am angry with them, but baddies are just baddies. Baddies do what baddies do. My problem is that I feel, that it's my fault. I should have seen that. I should have.
I'm with you 100%.
I should have understood.
How could I have been so stupid? So I just think it's really interesting that there's an overwhelming amount of evidence to support what you just said, that the people in charge do not have your family's interests at heart at all. In fact, they're working against those interests day and night for whatever reason. I don't think any honest person can deny that at this point, 4 years in. Why? Well, compound question. What percentage of your friends in 2020 arrived at the same conclusions you have arrived at? And what's the difference between you and those who didn't admit what was happening?
I would say I've lost touch with everyone from before, really.
Everyone.
Well, I'm still my family, and that's the family into which I was born, and also my married family, my in-laws. We've all remained as close as we ever were, although there were differences of opinion about what COVID was, about the products, the jabs, and so on. So there were differences of opinion, but it didn't cause any ill feeling or any schisms there. So those people are still we're still. That's all very loving and close.
Yes,
but work colleagues, friends, people that I had known in some instances from university days, people that I had worked beside. Broadly, I've lost touch with all of them. There's a handful of people. There's literally, count on the fingers of one hand the people that, as it turns out, ended up with all of the same suspicions and have ended up every bit as conspiracist as me. But as I'm sure you would testify, well, I don't know. I'm not going to prejudge your experience. But those people that I parted company with, that void has been filled. That vacuum drew into it a whole other cast of people, in many cases very unlikely and unexpected. It was Trudy and I, my wife and I, we would laugh about, who are you on the phone? Who have you just come off the phone from now? And I would say, and it would seem so bizarre and so unlikely. People that a few years ago I would never have imagined I would ever have a conversation with, not for any particular reason, but I just didn't expect to be pulled into their orbit or them into mine. So I've been through this process of shedding one carapace feeling very exposed, I suppose, like something that has cast out, like a crab without its shell until the shell hardens again. So very raw, nerves jangling. But now that it's forming again, and I would say, I suppose, to torture that analogy a little bit, I feel a little bit bigger. I feel as if I have grown, because I wouldn't go back. If I could press a button and make the COVID debacle not have happened, I wouldn't, because what I've learned and what I feel I now understand, or at least that which I think I now have enough wit to ask the relevant questions to better understand, I wouldn't exchange where I was for where I am now. So
back to a shallow, dishonest life.
And I lost all those affiliations that I had, because of the kind of television persona that I had when I was making soft history and archaeology documentaries. You get invited to be patron of this, representative of that. Just people want affiliation with you. So I was connected to Combat Stress, which was a veterans charity, and I was connected to the Association of Lighthouse Keepers. And
is that a big one in Scotland?
No, it's a very fringe little group that people that look after the lighthouses.
Group, yeah, the lighthouse keepers.
And as I say, I had an agent, and I had a column in the Sunday Times. I had been the president of the National Trust. I was a fellow of the Royal Society, and all of that's I'm not anymore. I'm not any of those things anymore. They all distance themselves from me, one by one, like dominoes toppling, and it hurts at the time, or the first one does, like the first punch in the face. You never get, every punch you get thereafter is sore, but it doesn't have the shock value of the first one. And so once I parted company with the one, I can see that coming. And it's just a process that I'm glad to be on. For me, for us, my family.
I think of this as the great sorting. I mean, under this immense downward pressure exerted on the West over the last 4 years, people sort of wound up on one side or the other, and it's not a clean political divide. It's not even a political divide, as you've pointed out. It's not left, right, Labour, Tory, whatever. But I've never figured out, and I've thought about it a lot, what is it in people that compelled them to move to one side or the other, particularly to the side you're on? You said it's unlikely people you never thought you'd be talking to. Like, what do they all have in common?
It's a question that, Trudy and I and others in a small group of like-minded people, that is the $64,000 question.
Okay, so you've thought about this.
As they used to say. What's the common denominator? What's the unifying feature? I don't really know. I think in there has been a great sorting. I think what happened in 2020, 2021, the choices that we were invited to make, pick a side. Are you going to be with us or not? And a large number of people decided to be with to remain part of the main.
The liars.
And other people pulled back from it. This was the great sorting of our generation.
Yes.
The first big sorting like that there has been for decades. And I think some of it, was simply down to people's natural, amygdala fight or flight response to threat. I think some people, you don't know until whatever the gunfire starts.
That's exactly right.
Whether you can't predict it until
you think you're brave.
Yeah. And people like Jordan Peterson, have articulated it very well, that the culture of movies that we were all invited to watch growing up, you're invited to think in World War II, you'd have been with the French Resistance.
Of course.
You would have hidden your neighbours because the black van was outside going to take them away. That's how people are invited to think that they would be the maverick. You would be the one that stands in the face of the tide. And then it happened. Before people realised what had happened, they had been sorted in that way. And I think the really part of what's really difficult now is that there's no going back, and yet we're all still living together. We're all the people are broadly still there. Those that jumped one way and those that jumped the other, and we have to find this way to go on, because we were invited to see what a lot of people were prepared to do. One of the most difficult parts of it, it sounds silly now because it's really a detail, but quite early on when the mask mandate was still very much, everyone had to wear a face mask. And I was having to go up and down to London for work. I was flying home every Sunday morning, and it would be, I don't know, British Airways flight or whoever, and I wasn't wearing a face mask and under any circumstances, and I would go through the airport, which was difficult enough.
Wait, if I can just ask you to pause, why weren't you wearing a face mask? Wouldn't it just be easier to do what everyone else does and be obedient?
Yeah.
Why are you so disobedient?
I was always a rule keeper, a law abider. I always have, I've never been a protester. I've never been an activist, anything. I'm very much I just was always, I wasn't really paying attention. That's the truth of it. I just wasn't really watching what was going on.
You were making archaeology documentaries.
Yeah, well, exactly. I had my own things going on. But to get back to the plane, so it'd be awkward enough, people watching you in the airport, but then I would go up the steps of the plane, the crew, the cabin crew would be masked, and they would say, "You're not wearing a face mask." And I would say, "No, I'm not wearing a face mask." Are you exempt? Some of them would say, and I would just say, yeah, I'm exempt, because in my head I was, because I thought I'm definitely, as a human being, I am definitely exempt from this nonsense. So I wasn't even lying in my own head. I thought, no, I am exempt because there's no point in this.
I'm not a slave.
But
I'm exempt.
You turn right down into the body of the plane and be 299 people with face masks on, glaring at me, and I would think, it's this close. If someone gave the signal to, let's pin this guy down in the aisle.
Let's eat him.
You could see, suddenly, I am actually at risk here, not from the establishment necessarily, not from the government in this moment. I'm just because I have made myself conspicuous.
Yes.
I have stood out from the norm, and anything could happen in the next 5 minutes. And I'd have to do the long walk down to my seat. It'd be 27E or something, some middle seat. And I have to get into it. And sometimes people either side of me would ring the service bell, put the light on, ask to be moved, to get away from me. And of course they couldn't because it was a full flight. And then I would have to sit for the hour and 15 minutes or whatever of the flight back up to Edinburgh as pariah, and then get off the plane. And then rinse and repeat. Do it next week, do it next week, do it next week.
Didn't it just...
And it's just, like I say, that's a silly anecdote.
It's
really,
not silly at all. It's totally real. And
but suddenly I saw people, and you think, gosh, you could suddenly see how things happen. Questions you had thought, I wonder how they got that to happen in Germany in the 30s. I wonder how they got that to happen in the terror in France in the, at the,
of course,
at the back
1709,
end at the 18th century. I wonder how they got that to happen in Russia. Well, I don't ask myself that anymore, because you think, oh.
You may have come to the obvious conclusion that the real debate is not between Republican and Democrat, or socialist and capitalist, right, left. The real battle is between people who are lying on purpose and people who are trying to tell you the truth. It's between good and evil. It's between honesty and falsehood. And we hope we are on the former side. That's why we created this network, the Tucker Carlson Network. And we invite you to subscribe to it. Go to tuckercarlson.com/podcast. Our entire archive is there. A lot of behind-the-scenes footage of what actually happens in this barn when only an iPhone is running. tuckercarlson.com/podcast. You will not regret it. So you said that in public. You said famously something close to what you just said, which is, oh, now I understand how totalitarian movements, sort of move downward into the population, and the population, by and large, supports some genocidal agenda that normal people wouldn't support, but they do support it. And you said that, and you were attacked as a bigot for saying that.
Oh yeah, but you must have been on the same. Surely you were getting the. What was your experience?
I don't pay any attention at all. So I'm sure I've been called every name. I don't care, at all. But I had checked out mentally, for sure. But
and what is it about? Why you've clearly been more sort of, I suppose, bullheaded, stubborn about things, and being prepared to stand in the face of things for longer than me. So what's it in? When you were asking me what did I think was the common, what was the common denominator? What was uniting all of the people that were refusing to go along with it? What's it in? What do you think?
Well, I just grew up in a different way, so I just knew that the majority opinion was not always right. I always felt that. And I knew that I didn't care what people thought of me except the people I love, just because of the way I grew up. And so it was not hard for me at all to take a position that is different from everyone else's. I only care about, the people directly around me. So that's just my temperament.
What about then the plight of, a concept like, democracy? We talk a lot, we're brought up in the West to talk about democracy and liberty and freedom and rights. What's your take on the reality of what democracy even means now? Because for me, I have been forced through a process of thinking about what democracy even is and wondering what it is that we had that we called democracy, and certainly wondering what it is that we have now, if anything, of that which we used to call
democracy, at least in my view, it's been redefined to mean democracy is a system of government in which the people in charge, whether the elected officials, the agency heads, the people who run well-funded NGOs, when their views are represented, even though they may constitute 2% of the population's views, when those views are represented, when they're fully in charge and can do whatever they want, that's democracy. That's not my view of democracy. My view of democracy is much more primitive, kind of the peasant view of democracy, which is it's a species of private property. It's ownership. I am a citizen of this country. I was born here. So are my parents. And I therefore have a share in this. I'm a shareholder in the country. Like, I own part of this. Mine, actually. Now, I own 1/350 millionth of it, but it's still ownership. It's still a share. And you can't treat me like a slave or even your servant, because this is my place. And that's what I think democracy is. It's almost like a temperamental, it's a description of the certain worldview that you have about your government and your relationship to that government. So that's how I feel about it. It doesn't mean that if 51% of the population wants something, it gets it every time. We have a representative democracy, a constitutional republic, as I'm often reminded. But basically, if you have a system where the people in charge don't care at all about what the population thinks, we know for sure that's not democracy. What did you think it was?
Well, as you just said, I in a state of semi-slumber, just imagined that I was represented in the places of power by the fact that I was able to vote. And I now realise that voting once every 4 or 5 years is nothing at all. That's a completely meaningless transaction to me now. It always was. I see now why I was, oh God, it's a general election, I better vote for somebody. I was always very disconnected from it.
Right.
But now I partly think that may have been some kind of semi-instinctive realisation that it was meaningless anyway. But I worry now about quite a lot of people, around me talk about direct democracy as a solution to our problems. And it's always the Swiss model that's quoted, referenda about this, that, and everything. You sort out everything by having a referendum about it. And that, having gone through the last 4 years, that worries me, because if there had been a referendum about face masks or lockdown or God forbid, mandatory jabs, we'd have got all of them. The majority vote would have enacted all of those things: mandated jabs, longer, tighter lockdowns, face masks, and all of the rest of it would have been enacted by direct democracy. So now I think the problem you've got there is the majority. You better hope they come to your conclusion.
Well,
because otherwise you've just, if we take the step of thinking that direct democracy is the way to get us out of these problems, well, in short, I live in fear of direct democracy.
Well, so why do you think they're saying that? What people leave out, I'm very familiar with Switzerland. I have ancestors from Switzerland, went to school in Switzerland. I have a lot
Lady Leda spoke of you. You're that tarnished. Guided here by kindly Mikola. Won't we all? I am Freya. I once